Funding for Overheard with Evan Smith is provided in part by Hilco Partners, Texas Government Affairs Consultancy, and its global healthcare consulting business unit, Hilco Health, and by the Matz and McHale Foundation in support of public television, and also by MFI Foundation, improving the quality of life within our community, and also by the Alice Kleberg Reynolds Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.
I'm Evan Smith. He's a one-time George W. Bush and Arnold Schwarzenegger strategist who used to work for Democrats but now swears he's an independent. He's a widely read columnist for National Journal, an influential analyst who appears frequently on ABC's This Week and Good Morning America, a best-selling author, and maybe the only person on earth who thinks the Detroit Tigers will win the World Series this year. We all have our blind spots. He's Matthew Dowd. This is Overheard. Is that a vote you'd like to have back now?
Because you're a judge or a justice in your case doesn't mean that you're free of personal opinions about them.
You have a dimmer view of him than you have of presidents past.
So when they take your name in vain, you just laugh it off. For the larger issue, though, in your mind, is that it's not about whether there ought to be a death penalty, but whether the death penalty as administered is fair.
Hello, Matthew.
Hey, Evan.
Very nice to see you.
Great to see you.
So let me get this straight. The president gets beaten horribly on Election Day. He asks you to come to the White House, and then he recovers. Is this a cause and effect? I've left out a few steps deliberately here.
Yeah, you could add also the cause and effect. I left President Bush at the end of 2004. His numbers were fine, and then they deteriorated dramatically. So
after you left,
there's
yeah.
two cause and effects.
You changed, the seas begin to... in fact, the president has rebounded some. We've, in fact, visited the week after the election in a couple of public forums, and you were quite straightforward about what the president had done wrong, but now he seems to have come back some from that period.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, the president is a very astute person. He's smart. He knows politics. Yeah. He wouldn't be successful as he is. He understood, I think, going into the election that the problem that they had, though they probably couldn't make many adjustments before the election day. And so I think he was already in a mode that he needed to make some changes,
yep.
Both personnel and policy and how he did outreach. And I think I was, having had previous conversations with him before he was president, when he had called, or we had actually met here in Austin during the book festival in 2006, which nobody really knows, at the Driscoll Hotel.
Well, so nobody watches the show, so that's actually fine.
And so I think it was part of his sort of, I'm going to try to get a different perspective and some people that I could trust.
Yep.
And
well, I have to ask now, since you brought this up. So the 06...
you brought this
well,
up.
But the 06 meeting, we'll get to
Yes.
the current meeting, but the 06 meeting with the then candidate, or then presumed candidate, Obama.
He hadn't announced yet.
What was the basis for that, and what was the conversation like? What can you tell us about
So
that?
I obviously, I'd come back here after the 2004 reelect, right, and come back to Austin, and it was getting settled in. It was just at the very end of the Schwarzenegger race that I was doing. Robert Gibbs and David Axelrod both were friends of mine. Axelrod older. I had actually done a mayor's race in Houston with Axelrod in the early 90s. Yep. And with Rahm Emanuel, who was involved in that race as well. And I had sort of said some things publicly and then to Gibbs that I was impressed by some of the things that Barack Obama had done, then Senator Barack Obama had done, especially a speech, I don't know if you remember it, on faith that he had given in the summer, I think, of 06. It was sort of faith in politics and what we need to do. And he was down here for his book
right.
that he had done. I was doing my book, actually with a joint panel with Maureen Dowd on Why Men Are Necessary, actually. It's kind of funny. The context.
Did you come up with an answer, actually?
No, but she certainly has an opinion on it.
Yeah.
And he just called me and asked if we could have breakfast, and he wanted to just sort of pick my brain about, he hadn't decided for sure that he was going to run.
But to talk things through.
And to sort of say what my perspective on that was, and we had about an hour-long right. conversation about it.
So you had a history, so when it came time for him to reach out to people after the election and say, basically, how do I get my mojo back? You were one of the people he called.
Yeah, and I had not talked to him since he had been elected president. And he did it on his own. As far as I could tell, it was not instigated by Axelrod. It was not instigated by Gibbs. He just decided I need to sort of get outside of the bubble. Yep. And have to get a perspective from people on it.
How long was the meeting?
About an hour in the Oval, and it was just he and I, which is funny because, and I told him this in the meeting, and obviously much of it was confidential, but I told him in the meeting, I had not had, that was the first one-on-one meeting with a president that I had, even though I had worked for and elected.
You and President Bush had
never had a
one-on-one
meeting in the Oval Office.
Well, that was why you quit.
Well,
You've answered the great mystery.
No, no, it's not a mystery. As the New York Times and you know, it's not a mystery.
So an hour with the president
in the Oval, it was just he and I sitting on the.
And how different is he now as president than he was as candidate or as presumed candidate?
He, as everybody knows, the last time I saw him, he had aged considerably.
Occupational hazard.
And he had lost weight, which I'd mentioned to him. I mentioned to him when I first saw him because I mean, he had lost a lot of weight. He's very lean.
Right.
And you know, I think it's hard.
He wasn't exactly Dom DeLuise before.
No, but I think but it's hard for him.
A good PBS reference.
It's hard for in that position and him being youthful that he is, and it's sort of his metabolism, I'm sure, and his constant activity. I'm sure it's hard to keep weight on, but he seemed very thoughtful. He seemed very relaxed. He was very open, actually. It wasn't just one of these ones. Sometimes you think with these meetings that somebody's just doing it for a PR move, that they're going to do it so that they can say they've done it. But as you know, and how it got leaked by somebody in the White House a month and a half afterwards. It wasn't like, I want to hold a meeting and then let's go out and tell everybody I had a meeting. It was a real conversation, and he wanted a real perspective.
Yeah, and what can you talk about? You say it's confidential, I understand that, but can you characterize generally the topics that were discussed? Or the thrust of the conversation?
I mean, you know, it's not a rocket science for him to sort of guess that he was interested in my perspective about, you know, what might have gone right, what might have gone wrong, what they can do better. And you know, my thing with anything in life, doesn't benefit much to spend too much time on what's happened. It's better to spend time on what you can change. You can't change what already happened, though you have to understand why you might have fallen down on that. But I have spoken and suggested things publicly about him and what he might do differently. And I would say that I wouldn't say anything publicly that I wouldn't tell somebody privately.
And so you didn't give him a different set of observations than you've given previously?
No, but I obviously filled it in some.